Jeff Johnson started.
Welcome, everybody. It's the workshop for the mayor and alderman, May 28, 2015. The prayer, I'll have the prayer Tuesday night. Alderman Jones, you got the Pledge of Allegiance. Look over your minutes. Make sure your minutes. Before we start anything, I think we got two people that's going to come up and speak. The RTA first, Bruce.
Yeah, let's do
We'll get the
number
RTA
20.
up so y'all can go on and get out.
Number 20 first.
Number 20.
So if you want to go up to the podium,
Go to the podium.
and make your request.
Good evening. Thank you again. My name is Eric Byer. I'm with the Regional Transportation Authority, and I'm joined by Gabriel Burgess, who is the RTA road supervisor. Earlier this year, we came before you and entered into a partnership for the utilization of the park and ride lot facility right over at Veterans Park. We're coming close to the end of that memorandum of understanding that expires June 30. We're here for consideration of perhaps extending that. We'd love to extend that further through the year, but understand that there may be some concerns as far as potential conflicts with the utilization of the park. On average, we probably use, what we say, 30 to 40 spaces at the park. The service is Monday through Friday. Runs primarily during peak times to get people between Laverne and downtown, primarily to jobs, and then also there is a Murfreesboro Smyrna Express, local service that services Laverne as well. So for your consideration this evening is extending that memorandum of understanding at for a further period that would work both for the city as well as the RTA.
One question, I guess AC, it all hinge on, the park,
Well, and that's the thing. So far, it's been really good. It's been a good partnership. We've not had any issues come up. But end of June, July, football starts, and then when you got fall ball starting, we don't have enough spaces as it is. They're parking on the grass to come to practices and everything else. So once those seasons hit, and then we got National Night Out to look at, which is an event that takes place during the week. We got several other things that go on in the park too. So, and 40 spaces is a lot of spaces. I mean, I've rode through several times, and it's on average about 40 spaces. Give or take a few here and there. But I don't mind helping out, and it's been good so far. But I think to go any further, it's going to be a big headache for us. And I know you're going to get some backlash from some mad parents, and then you got all those football players practicing in the front field and in the side field. So, there's a lot more liability, I think, with something, with helmets and things flying around out there. I don't know. And we need the spaces. We really do. So that's where we're at with it.
When is the agreement runs out?
Sir, it runs through June 30. So
June 30.
Currently we have, under the
30 more days.
current scenario, we have about a month to notify passengers. Our biggest challenge, and your staff has been very helpful as far as just trying to identify alternate locations. We've had some alternate sites through the years that the service has run, and part of the challenge is not only has their business grown, but as traffic and our ridership has grown, that's put increased demands just here locally. So ideally, we'd like to have a permanent home. We're obviously not quite there yet. So looking for a place that we can use in the interim until we can get to that point. So with a move, I guess during that transition, should an extended period not work, we're always open and trying to find some alternate locations. I know Gabe here has talked to a number of organizations and businesses that you have referred him to and tried to explore that. So if anything, if we could extend it at least by a couple of months to give our passengers a little bit of additional notice so they can make alternate plans as far as that, if that's can be accommodated. And again, if there's any sites that you all are aware of within the city that would make sense for us to move to as a new home.
Would it have to be an all-inclusive location like Veterans Park? I mean, I know you can get all, as AC said, all 40.
Sure.
How about an A and B location?
As far as maybe first come, first served at X number?
And
Gabe's really the operation pro on this. Gabe, what would be your perspective on that?
That would, excuse me, that would entail some change in the times of pickups. Also be,
I mean, if you could still keep it on Murfreesboro Road, though.
if we keep it on Murfreesboro Road, it depends on the location, how far each area would be, each location would be.
Yeah.
If it's not too far, it will work, it's feasible. But if it's spread out.
I mean, I'm just throwing it out there. You said y'all were looking for other
Yes.
locations, but why not, I mean, if you're just looking for a location that's gonna encompass 40, why don't you look for one that's on Murfreesboro Road that can take 20 and assign them an A pass, and then tell the other people you need to go to B?
Kind of a first come,
and
first
keep it
serve,
going.
or on a particular trip?
Yeah.
Yeah. And the biggest challenge, of course, is just safety. Everything is based around safety and making sure that the passengers can safely get to the vehicle. Part of the challenge is the bus does not go, the bus can, but operationally we don't put it in reverse, so we need kind of a clean turnaround. But that would be something to consider.
I mean, as far as what I'm looking at, I mean, what I'm thinking about,
Sure.
rather, I don't think you shouldn't have to get off of Murfreesboro Road. I mean, you should be able to,
Ideally, because that would save time and we could board more quickly and
Yeah.
then continue on. Any type of deviation off of Murfreesboro Road does cost additional time.
yeah.
So, agreed.
You were in Kroger for quite some time, and then I think your
Yes, sir.
lease ran out with them. But what was what's the thinking about the Food Lion? Have you checked in over there? I mean, to me, that's the only other place
We,
that I can think that makes sense.
Yeah.
We did, they weren't, excuse me, they weren't able to accommodate us because of the size that we had, and also it would affect their business as well as the strip mall area.
Sir, that was a location that originally started and we outgrew that, and then that's where Kroger was able to accommodate us. And so, my observation, it's a good thing that businesses have continued to grow. Utilization has grown, so perhaps distant spots that they didn't use before, they now are using. So we're, of course, glad to see that the merchants are being used, but that's obviously their primary business first concern.
I don't think the morning would be a problem, but it's the evening would be the main deal.
Yeah, in the evening time, well, and plus when school's out too, the more kids that are in the park, the more chance there's of something that could go wrong. But mornings is not the issue. It is the early afternoon and evenings.
I mean, another thing you can that I'll just throw out there, I just noticed that the BP is vacant. I mean, if you can give it the owner of that, that's 20 locations.
Sure.
And it's right there on Murfreesboro Road. They can park, walk to the bus, and you can continue to go on.
You could probably put a bus stop in there. Even,
Yeah.
I mean, I looked at that today. When
That's
I
a
went
big
by and thought that.
location. I mean, that's a perfect location there.
Any relationships or as far as points of contact that you can open up for us? Gabe's exceptional at that as far as just willing to kind of do the homework. And again, your staff has been extremely helpful too and given us some good insights and feedback. So perhaps something that we can explore is looking at both that A and B option, like you said, perhaps going a little bit smaller, trying to keep it close to Murfreesboro Road, and see if that provides a few more opportunities so that not one single business or site feels perhaps overwhelmed by the entire burden, let's say.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure they'll be more amenable to 20 spots as opposed to 40 or 60 spots. in the location.
Taking that approach, would you all be open to considering perhaps sending the memorandum of understanding either a month or two just to give us additional time to explore, or what would be comfortable, what would you all feel most comfortable to?
I guess to go back to AC, I guess June and July would be the busiest time. If
Well,
we're
and
gonna
that's the
send it
thing.
there,
We could
might well-
probably make it through June, and you got the 4th of July and the other events that take place during the day, during the week also. That's the issue. So once we get into July, that's gonna be difficult.
Yeah, even
Because-
into June, it's gonna be.
Yeah, because football, I mean, you'll have teams coming out there and getting started practicing and stuff in July. So, they'll be out there, trying to get ready for things, and so, and then we have the National Night Out in August, so. But there are a few issues with it.
4th of July, obviously, we don't run service because of the holiday. And one option too is, operationally, I think Gabe could speak to this more, is if we post that the lot is not available on a particular day to ridership. Again, I don't know if that kind of becomes too confusing for riders because they're used to a certain pattern, and then, you know, we create another problem. We certainly don't want to do that for you or for us, so that'd be one consideration.
Have you, you know, and this was a temporary agreement to begin with, have you
Sure.
talked to some businesses in the area already about some spots? Do you have anything pending?
There's nothing new pending. Gabe, do you want to kind of speak to?
Nothing's new pending. As I spoke with Mr. Davis and Mr. Richardson before, that when they did give us the agreement and we did sign everything, that was the intent that I would keep looking. And I spent many days and nights up here, practically feel like I live in Laverne, traveling back and forth, talking to different people, and a lot of been turned away because of either the size or they can't accommodate us because of the size of their lots or the size of what we have of riders there.
Have you faced this challenge in other communities, and if so, how did you resolve it?
You know what, historically, this really hasn't been a problem. We had a similar challenge recently in Franklin. We had been at Williamson Square probably at least 15 years. A new owner of a shopping center came in and gave us basically a couple weeks' notice, and we had to quickly scramble, and we were accommodated by a local church that has a large parking lot. And so we use a sister church in another city in Spring Hill, and so that opened that relationship. And so kind of as a community effort, they wanted to make their parking lot available. But more recently, again, that's the most recent situation, but usually it's been a kind of a gentleman's agreement that we've had good luck, because what it does is bring a group of people to merchants, and so they're more apt to patronize a particular business because of the location.
When's the last time you were in contact with the Food Lion Shopping Center?
I'm sorry, sir?
The last time you were in contact with Food Lion Shopping Center?
The last time I was in contact with Food Line was right before I approached Mr. Richardson about using your parking lot here in the area back here where the police department was.
The reason I say that is I think they, if they're not already, they may be under new ownership.
Okay.
So you may want to at least look there. That may give you another option.
So you're specifically asking for 30 or 60 additional days, or?
That would be helpful, again, just to do a little more due diligence, and then just to give us enough time to notify passengers. Either, you know, often they have good insights as well, and we take that feedback. But give them the opportunity to make additional plans so that they should come up with something. But we're also sensitive to, again, the ongoing needs of the city and activities you all have planned as well.
I see the month of July, what all's going on at the park?
Well, the 4th of July, and that's the big thing, is the kids and the football stuff.
Well,
is
you won't
starting
be
to pick
running on
up.
4th of
We
July.
won't be running on
No,
4th
sir.
of July, no.
No, sir.
Right. And the football stuff starts up. I don't have the exact dates in front of me on that, but I can get them. And I wouldn't be opposed to June. I mean, we can definitely extend it for 30 days, and I'm comfortable with that. but-
We got it to June
already-
30th.
got it to-
Yeah, okay, so it's July.
What they want to do is 30 more days
Yeah.
in the month of July.
I'll get that information back to the board before meeting Tuesday.
You know, if we can accommodate it, it'd be nice. We can't.
Right, right.
You know, we can't, but.
We appreciate it. And again, as you're thinking of some of these other options, please continue to forward that to us so that Gabe can follow through. And again, we can continue our dialogue with staff, because again, they've been very helpful in this process.
Practice and ball, they start what time?
Well, usually when they start practicing in the evenings, it's around 5 o'clock. You know, they'll start showing up then in the fields. I'll get with Luis too, because the league is under new management now.
How many buses y'all got go pull in there?
Gabe,
During the week, during the evening?
I don't have my schedule. Excuse me, I'm on vacation this week, so
You got three.
you have to, I don't have anything. It's there's 3 early trips in the afternoon, and then there's two buses until 6, and then after 6 there's 1.
And the final outbound would be folks coming from Murfreesboro that would be dropped off in Laverne. So
Right.
the majority of your traffic, sir, you'll see is people come from downtown, heading home, starting about 4:30, 4:45, 5.
And majority of the cars are usually gone right before your teams will be starting at 5 o'clock, no later than 5:30.
I guess one of my concerns it would be if we were to extend this for another 30, 60 days, whatever that time frame is, what happens at the end of that 30, 60 days? I mean, I don't want to keep coming back every
Sure.
couple of months or whatever and keep
Sure.
asking for the same thing. At what point are we going to cut it
Sure.
off, or you make a decision on moving it elsewhere?
Sure. If we're not successful, there wouldn't be a park and ride lot. We would still be able to pick up along Murfreesboro Road. Gabe could speak probably from an operation perspective, probably identify where key bus stop locations would be, so that at least people know there's a place to direct them and you all could give us input. There would just not be a physical presence where people could safely leave their car in the morning or afternoon to ride the bus, but it'd be more of a tradition to just drop off at a particular bus stop and pick up from there.
And pretty much I will work with your Department of Public Works and also with you to designate what areas that you would like to have, a bus stop outside of the ones that we have out there now.
Because I know I occasionally see people standing by the side of the road waiting for
Yes, sir.
for bus to pick them up anyway, so.
Yes, sir.
Kind of be similar to
And that would continue where it's most convenient. That's one of the flexibilities and the strengths of this particular route is that you can be picked up along Murfreesboro Road, between the cities. So that's how it would look like.
Well, I don't know how long, I don't know if there's a deal in the works already or not, but as I said, the BP, I'm sure the owner of that space would be more than happy to lease out, as far as just parking.
Okay.
And I'm sure it can accommodate at least 20 cars. And that's a perfect spot to pull into and pull out of.
Okay.
I mean, it's got more than enough space, so I would look into that definitely.
We will.
Okay.
But and I think you should stick with the A and B location, because 40 cars is a lot of cars to try to park in one spot.
And I just got a text, football does start in July. I'm trying to get the exact date, but with the new league management in there, it'll be in July, probably earlier in July, so.
I guess at this point, what you would need to do is submit your letter, your amendment, for however many days you're asking for.
Okay.
And we'll bring this up Tuesday night and let the board vote on it. Any other I would suggest somebody be here Tuesday night in case there's more questions from the board and
I'll be
go
here.
from there.
I'll be here Tuesday night.
We thank you all for your time and consideration. You've been very generous and appreciate you accommodating us as well on the agenda.
Thank you.
Thank
all.
you.
Appreciate it.
I think we'll move to number 3. That's the water and sewer rate study, Ralph Cross. Get Ralph in and out. Is he here?
Yes.
Oh, there he is. Use his head back there.
Good evening. It's nice to see everyone this evening. And, it's dry so far, and we may have some rain a little bit later. It's appropriate for talking about water and sewer studies, isn't it? I want to express my appreciation to Phyllis and Bruce. They've made this study very easy for me. They've provided information as I needed it. They have made themselves available to have reviews to answer my questions, and that makes these kinds of processes so much more easy and convenient, and I have great confidence in them and their ability to provide this information. My name is Ralph Cross, and I'm a consultant with MTAS, and I've met some of you before. We've been addressing this subject a few years ago, and we're coming back and talking about it again. You've asked for me to take a look at your water and sewer utility, determine the financial status of it, and so I pulled together information provided by the staff here. I've taken some information from the comptroller's website looking at annual financial reports, and I've tried to take and look at what has been happening here over the last 2 or 3 years, and then project it forward, taking into consideration the year end of this year and projecting forward. I didn't put into this study, I didn't consider any kind of a rate increase starting on July 1. I started by looking at this as though we had no rate increase planned for the next year. And I think that there was an ordinance that you had in place that was going to establish a 3% and 6% rate increase. But in order to do this study and figure out where we need to go, I want to start at the baseline. So that's what we've done. I've been asked by you to prepare a multi-year financial analysis of water and sewer utility. And we're considering the financial impact of several $1 million of capital improvement for the system. And that, when we put money into the ground, that increases some of our expenses called depreciation. And depreciation is one of the operating expenses that is required to be covered by the rates and revenues of a utility as defined by the state of Tennessee. We evaluate the cost of debt and depreciation associated with that CIP. You've got a large utility, you've got a lot of responsibility associated with those assets, and there's a lot of people that are interested in how you operate those assets. The EPA, for one, the Tennessee Department of Economic Community, TDEC, and the Water and Wastewater Financing Board. So they're looking at you, and they're looking to you to have a financially sound business that has an ongoing financial standing. And that's what we're looking at here. We know that our customer base isn't growing that much right now, but within the process of the study, I've assumed a 1% growth for water and sewer customers. It may be more or less based on some developments coming up, but 1% is a conservative estimate. So where do we start? The first thing we have to think about when we're being evaluated by the state of Tennessee is that we want to review our total net position, our change in net position, and our bonded debt. You may, I don't know if you'll remember or not, but when we talked about this last time, we were talking about net assets. Well, the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, which is the governing, the organization that determines how we do financial reporting, determined that net position is a better term to discuss the financial standing of a utility. And so we are using that term now and have been for a couple of years. And there was an adjustment to your financial records that I'll show you how that happened, because there is a slightly different way of determination of net assets versus net position. So total net position is a consideration. The change in the net position from one year to the next. If you're saying that the total net position is the value of the system, if it improves or if it improves in its condition, the total net position goes up. If we start to see changes in that net position, the change may take it down because the total net position can still be positive, but it may be declining. So I'm going to show you some of those relationships. And then the last thing is how we're dealing with bonded debt. The Wastewater Facilities Act of 1987 created this board to oversee distressed utilities. Well, what constitutes a distressed utility? 2 consecutive years of negative change to net position. That we can still be having positive income, and we can still be seeing the system growing, but it's growing at a slower pace. And they're wanting to make sure that that pace does not decline 2 years in a row. A deficit in total net position is another condition for declaring you as distressed and then defaulting on debt. If you are found if you're found to be experiencing one of these 3 conditions, you'll be asked to come to the board and have a meeting to discuss how you're going to change that trend from that negative change in net position. Well, what is net position and what does it mean? Well, the change in net position is not net income. It used to, we could look at the bottom line and say, well, operating revenues less operating expenses, and there's our income, and that told us the health of the system. But now, the Governmental Accounting Standards Board asks us to consider contributions to the system like grants, which used to be balance sheet items. Now they're considered a non-operating revenue. Contributions by developers, which is not cash. A donation to you of pipe in the ground goes into this, basically this income statement. It's not cash, it's equipment, it's water lines, it's sewer lines that may be installed and donated to you. So when we start looking at the net position, we have to consider not only the income from operations, not only the non-operating revenue, which would be interest earnings, but we also put grants and these contributions, which may be non-cash events. They may be stuff, and then transfers in from other funds. That all contributes to a positive impact to change in net position. Items that have a negative effect our negative income. So if I'm losing money, if I'm not covering my operational costs, then that's going to have a negative impact on operations. And then interest payments, which are considered non-operating expenses, that decreases the change in net position. And transfers out, which is taking money out. So these are the impacts. These are things that are not all addressed by your rates. Some of these things, these donations can come in and have a positive effect on change in net position, and then the next year you don't get them and the change in net position falls. You can see from the last couple of years. In 2012, $2.6 million was our change in net position. In 2013, it went down to $1.3 million. And then in 2014, it went back up to $2.246 million. In 2015, we think that it's going to be somewhere around $2.5 million. It's a projection at this point. In 2013, there was a conversion in the recognition of assets to net position. So there's a slight modification there when we go over the financial statement. If you'll see, looking back to 2007 and 8, when we had some of our first discussions about the utility, your changes in financial position were significantly below zero. The $2.2 million, $1.4 million, and $1.4 million. And then we did the utility study and we made some changes in the way things were being recognized and the way that your system was operating, changing its profitability. Well, our total net position, as you'll see, when we were losing those, when we have such significant changes in net assets and slash net position, you can see that the total net asset was falling. After the rate increases, it's coming back up. So you're moving in a positive direction. Those are positive trends. And if we look at our revenue for the past few years, you've implemented rate increases that occurred for revenue for water and revenue for sewer, and those have had a positive effect on the system, as well as this marginal growth in your customer base. Since 2011-12, there's been a significant control of your expenses too. They've been holding relatively constant. We haven't seen a large increase in the expenses, so that's had another positive effect, that the revenue that was coming in is covering those expenses at a higher rate. This slide's a little bit difficult to see, but you can see that in 2011-12, revenue was about $9.5 million. In 2012-13, $9.6 million. 2013, $10 million. We think it's going to be about $11 million this year. You've had those positive impacts from the rate increases that you've been doing, plus the growth. And when you look at your operating expenses, they're holding steady at about $8 million. So you haven't seen a lot of growth. The graph is going to show that the operating expenses have been holding rather constant for the last few years. So that means that if revenues are going up and expenses are maintained at a level, then our income is going to be going up too. So you can see from $1.5 million up to $2.8 million. We have also non-operating expenses that are coming in, and that's our interest payments. We've borrowed money, we're having to pay it back, and that interest payment reduces our revenues just like operating expenses. It's non-operating because it's not considered with the operation of the plant. It's the cost that we cover that's not operational. So that has a separate line in the financial report. So our income before contributions, $983,832,000, $1.9 million, and $2.2 million, rounding out the last couple of years. Remember I told you the change in net position is affected by contributions that are considered not income. A tap fee is not considered an income. A tap fee is a contribution because you're selling anything beyond the cost of installation of a tap is called the capacity that an individual is buying into the plant, buying into the ability to process. Once a tap is installed, you're promising that you'll take care of that customer, and everything that they buy from you or send back to you, you're going to handle it. So that's part of the capacity, and anything beyond the cost of actually installing that tap in the ground is considered a capacity charge against the capacity of the plant to process. So our change in net position is influenced in a positive way by 140,000 for 2 years, 225 in 13-14, and approximately $200,000 in 14-15. There are some donated capital assets too that made a big difference in 11-12. There was $1.5 million of donations in 11-12 and $356,000 in 13-14, but that's falling off, and you can't count on that for continuing impact. And actually, those kind of donations can boost your change in net position, and then when it doesn't come in the next year, you're going to fall, and that's what we're seeing. So the change in net position goes from $2.6 million in 11-12 to $2.4 million estimated for 2014-15, and bounces up and down between them from $2.6 million to $1.3 million. You see how those impacts of those donations can make such a big impact on the evaluation of your consideration of being a distressed utility or not. And you really have no control over that. It's something that's the way it's accounted for, and that's the way you're evaluated. So our net position is impacted. We take for 2011-12, we take the $37 million, we add the $2.6 million to it, and that gives us the ending net position of $39,665, and that translates all the way through. That's where we get the source of the total net position that you saw in the graph. And this is where we get the impact of the change in net position over time. Now we take that and carry it forward and produce it, a pro forma, a projection based on the same kind of environment over the next few years. What's happening with debt service? Total, default on debt was another issue, wasn't it? If we default on debt, we're going to have to go before the board and explain how we're going to cure that situation. Not a problem for you. You've got, you did a refunding a couple of years ago, but there's no additional debt that's planned for issuance over the next part of this study period, and your principal is running about 1.25. Basically, it's $1,240,000 going to $1,255,000. As the debt matures, you see the interest rates here begin to fall. We've got 608, but it's falling down to 539. Interest is also a consideration in terms of our change in net position. And this graph shows you how that's falling. The principal maintains relatively steady, and the more the principal you pay, the faster the interest rate goes down. The amount of interest we have to pay goes down because we have less principal outstanding. So you're seeing that trend. As the level of principal stays basically the same, the interest rates are falling quickly. Not the interest rate, but the interest payments are falling quickly. And when we do an evaluation of the revenue that we think you're going to have in 15-16, compared to the amount of principal and interest you're paying from water and sewer sales, which is what we actually charge our customers, that's a rate that we can count on. From the water and sewer sales, we're paying about 18 cents of every dollar of sales to service the debt. And that's moderate, I would say. If you have 10% in that 10 cents of every dollar, that's low. 30 cents of every dollar is starting to get a little bit difficult to pay. But I've seen some that are higher. In your case, you're right in the middle of that comfort range of 10 to 30, right there at around 18%. So, and we're seeing that falling, so that will improve over time. We look at our capital improvements. We forecast depreciation based on that capital improvement program. The depreciation and projections is $1.7 million. That's coming out of your financial report. And we think that the improvements that you're bringing into play here will be $62,000 in addition to cover the capital improvements that you're going to be putting in place. In 16-17, that depreciation steps up as we see more of the plant going into place. And $2 million, we're going to be up to almost $2 million in 17-18 when we consider the improvements. So these depreciation amounts are forecast based on the investments you're putting in the plant, and they're going forward, and those are pressure on your revenues to try to offset the cost and keep your change in net position manageable. Our expense assumptions are that our salaries are going to go up at 3%. Benefits, very hard to say right now. I heard that a system not too far from here experienced a 40% increase in their benefit package. And then I heard another that Forecast 12 got a 5% renewal. So what is going to happen? Not sure. But 10% gives us a reasonable margin to forecast into the future. And then the other expenses coming in at 3%. There's been an adjustment made to expenses to offset the forecast of the sewer treatment fees, so that we feel like we've got those back in range, trued up to the new arrangement that you have with Metro. And if we say that our capital projects move forward as proposed and our depreciation goes in place, as we said, if we also look at, from the revenue side, 1% annual growth in customer base, no appreciable decline in water service, and without adjusting the rates at all, starting July 1, we would see the upcoming graph. The thing that I want to show you in this upcoming graph is the income before contributions. This is the evaluation of the impact of revenue and expenses before we get into that area of capital contributions, which you see has such an impact on the financial consideration of the wastewater board. But this is part that you can control. This is the part that you have the ability to see and to project. If we look at this income before contributions, we see the growth in the customer base allows marginal growth in water and sewer sales. The depreciation expenses increase with investments in the plant. And tap fees, we're saying, remain relatively constant. And you can see here, without adjusting any rates at all, the black line represents your income, and the red line represents the expenses. And the difference between the operating revenues and the expenses is the green line below, representing our income or loss before contributions. And you can see this looks much like a tweezer. If we're not making any changes in the revenue and just projecting growth at 1%, but the expenses are going up at 3%, plus we have depreciation increasing because of the capital investment, it makes perfect sense that these two lines are going to close. So we have to consider what that's going to do to the change in net position. We're still making money, but we're making money at a declining rate, and that's going to have a negative impact on the change in net position. So if we look at the cash flow requirements, what's happening with cash flow with this? You issued some debt, and you've got money in the bank, and this cash graph represents the investment of the projects over time, plus the money coming in at the current level. But you can see here, as that picture starts to close, that we're using more cash because we're having our income coming at a lesser rate. What's happening with the change in that position? This is what the state's going to look at to evaluate your system. And whenever you see this, that declining income has a negative effect on your change in net position, and it starts to drop. And this is the current year, 14-15. We know it's going to drop this year, and we expect it to drop every year thereafter because we're not, the income is falling, and we're not seeing grants. Even if we hold expenses nearly as tight as we can, you still look like you're going to suffer a visit to the state around 2016 or 17. So how do we get around this? If we look at, and this is saying if the expenses grow, and you can't hold expenses like they are forever. You've got to keep the plant maintained. You've got to recognize the depreciation for the installation of new product and new plant and equipment and new plant in the ground. And so, and if you get a developer contribution of lines, you're going to have to recognize that in your plant, and that's going to increase your depreciation too. So even though it's a gift, we have to put it in plant, we have to depreciate it over time. So these are all impacts your expenses. So if we look at having no increase this year, but we have, because if you look here, having an increase here to try to impact change in net position is not going to do you any favors for next year. We know this is dropping. We want this year, 16, 17, to not drop. We want it to rise up a little bit. So if we put a 2% increase in water and sewer in July 1, 16, and a 2% increase in July 1, 17, we can have a different profile on that graph for the change in that position. The operating revenue will exceed the operating and non-operating expenses, just like it would if you didn't put the rate increases in. The income and loss, though, would be, we saw it before, it was falling dramatically. If we put it in these revenue increases we're talking about, then the operating loss is not going to fall as quickly. You'll have good income until you get around to the year 1920. So if you look, just those increases in July and 16 and July 17 will boost that income potential, and it slows the closing of the expenses against the revenues. What's happening with cash flow? Cash is going to be maintained relatively stable because as we look here, the income is remaining stable, so the impact on cash is going to be stable as well. If we look at the change in net position by putting these amounts in, you saw the graph that represented the income was remaining stable. Well, that has a positive effect on the change in net position too. It's possible, judging from these two numbers, $1.5 million to $1.6 million, that's $100,000 that could go either way. And if you're still conservative with expenses and maybe the revenues come in a little better, could be a donation or a grant or anything like that comes in, that number could easily exceed that $1.5 million. So we certainly want the 17-18 number to be higher. That keeps us from being invited to go to state Tennessee. But it's possible with good management, a tighter management, and trying to maintain what you've got, it's possible that that number will not fall below the, even if we don't raise rates. We'll just have to see. So comments are, we've done this utility study to try to give you a ballpark figure of what's happening with your system, and you've got a healthy system. As a matter of fact, I was looking at the revenues for water and revenues compared to sewer, and your sewer rates are coming very close to matching up with the sewer expenses. Now, why is that important? Because the state of Tennessee was looking at legislation last session of passing a law where the water utility would have to be separated from the sewer utility, separate funds. If they did that, a lot of systems have a little bit of a cost shifting for water helping the sewer out because sewer is so much more expensive to operate. And having water and sewer in the same fund, which is really the same use of the utility, that allows them to have rates that are easier to handle. But if they change that to separate the water and the sewer utilities, you're going to be able to accomplish that with minimum effect. So we talked about these smaller rate increases in July 2016 and July 2017. If by following those increased recommendations, I think that you're going to see a positive change in that position in a couple of years. I think that we want to pay close attention to it to make sure that that's actually going to work. I think that if the projections are at this time that those two increases in those 2 years will keep us in will keep us in compliance with the Water and Wastewater Financing Act through 2019-20. I'd be glad to address this. I know that this is a complex subject, and I'm trying to give you an overview of this. If you've got questions about it, I'll be glad to address them now.
If we can go back to the slide that showed the 0 and the 2. Right there. Okay. 15, no rate increase year of this coming fiscal year.
Yes. There's no need, according to the analysis, there's no need for you to address revenue changes because you're going to see you have a profitable system and you've had a good positive change in that position, and it's not necessary to raise the rates right now. And the reason I'm really suggesting rate increases in those next 2 years is to affect the change in that position so that you don't have to go before the state board. You're making money. If I'm going to go back to the slide, this is the case where you have no rate increases at all. You're making money, but your change in that position is falling, and that's going to put you out of compliance with the state of Tennessee because of some donations, tap fees, and things that have made positive impact. Your system's gaining in value. But our expenses are going up with donations. So you're making money, but you're making it at a declining rate, and the fact that it's falling off so quickly would get you an invitation.
In other words, the expense and your revenue need to stay about equal.
Yes, and looking at this kind of a scenario, this puts you in a better, more streamlined, more similar relationship between revenue and expenses so that income flattens out and makes a positive contribution to change in that position.
2% raise next year and then the year after. Right now, just projected. You're going to come back in, as we spoke today, and reevaluate just to see where we're at. We may not need it, right? So
you may not need it.
Right.
It's so close. It's so close here. That's relatively break even. But we can look at it and take your audited numbers and your projections, what happened, if you want to look at it around the first of the fiscal year, or if you want to wait a few months and evaluate the increase for the second year. Either way, I'll be glad to help with that. Your contract that the letter of agreement that you signed gives you this study and then another study within 18 months. So you can pick the time of your choosing to revisit this, and we'll have a really good idea exactly what this number is. We've got a good projection. You've got good staff, and they've given their financial records are really tight. So we'll see. But the audit will give us an exact number that we can move forward. There is no doubt that this fall is going to happen. It may not be that much. But this is an easy study. I get to say no increase. Well, this year. And 2% is candy for the fiscal year 16.
You're doing a good job.
Well, thank you very much. I did have great help, and I can't stress how important it is to have people so cooperative within the system. Bruce and Phyllis, I've known them for years, and they're great people. It's my pleasure to work with you. I've got, oh yeah, there it is. Thank you for the opportunity.
Anybody got more questions, or they can call you
Absolutely.
anytime between now and Tuesday.
And they can call me anytime between now and whenever.
I appreciate your hard work.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, let's just get back on track. Well, I guess we're down to old business. Second reading, ordinance 2015, an ordinance to amend Title 12, Chapter 6 Section 12-602 of the Laverne Municipal Code requiring modification to the residential codes. I guess that's the fire sprinklers.
Yes, sir. This is the second ordinance that we actually started before the other one. But anyway, this is the one we deferred at the last meeting because the other ordinance had not been approved at that point. So once this ordinance is approved next week, if the board does approve it, once we advertise the ordinance in the newspaper, then it'll be in effect and sprinklers requirements will be no longer. So if the board chooses to approve this ordinance, we'll be finished with sprinkler requirements for residential homes.
Anybody got any questions? I know it seemed like we've had this last 6 months, but I guess everybody's done answered everything they're gonna answer. So if no questions, we'll move to number 5. Number 5 is second reading ordinance 2015-10, an ordinance of the city of Laverne, Tennessee, adopting an annual budget and tax rate for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2015 through June 30th, 2016.
Only thing I'd want to add here is we will have a public hearing for this ordinance at 6:30 p.m. Tuesday evening, so be prepared to be here for that. We've advertised it as required according to state law. Nothing has changed since the first reading of the ordinance.
And this is where we're lowering the taxes 2.5%. 2.5%.
It'll go to 97.5 cents per $100 assessed value.
Anybody got any further questions on number 5? If not, we'll move on to number 6. Number 6 is second reading ordinance 2015-11, an ordinance to amend the city of Laverne, amend the Laverne zoning ordinance to, as it pertains to alternation of physical services, received a favorable recommendation from the Planning Commission on April 28th, 2015.
This is the ordinance where we're amending the zoning ordinance regarding these check cashing places.
Okay.
Putting
So many distance between them.
requirements
Okay.
in there and things like that. So this will be the final reading on this ordinance as well.
This is the distance between each one of them. Okay. Any questions on number 6? And now we're down to consent agenda. Alicia? Number 7 is yours.
Good evening, Mayor and Alderman. The first item on here is the concrete maintenance. We only had one response, but Garland did talk to several people and got good responses on JR Construction out of Nashville, and we would like to have this board award that to them at this time. Any questions on that one? Okay, on the asphalt paving, we're going to ask that this be awarded to Hoover, but we would like a special exception that when Hoover doesn't always have their plant open as late as Rogers Group or as early as Rogers Group opens theirs back up here in Rutherford County, here in Laverne, and he would like the exception that if he needs it and can't get just the materials portion from Hoover, to be able to go and negotiate with Rogers Group on that, because they would be the only plant open at that time.
Oh, was this rebidded out or?
It was bid out this last week.
Okay.
The street striping was bid out, and along with arrows and other specifics, I think I've attached that. And Kerr Brothers was the only one responded, so Garland ask that we just go back with them on that. Okay, the next item I have is the portable full matrix, portable signs. We did bid out ADCO signs, but after we had 3 different companies with 4 different choices that come back in. And after having Glenn look at the technology on them, looking at the warranties on them, we felt it was better to go with Superior Traffic Control for a Solar Tech. Yes, I included how the money was going to be paid because I wanted you to understand that we were paying, the monies are going to be split between Public Relations, the Street Department, and then the Water and Sewer Department.
Is that for 2 signs or 3?
2 signs.
Excuse me.
2 portable electronic signs. This one will have up to 4 lines that you can put on it.
In the memo, it refers a spreadsheet for warranty and pricing comparison. I failed to get that in the packet, so I will email that to all of you to make sure you get that. I apologize for that.
Any other questions? I'm going to let, well, Chris, do you want this one? The GSA contract for the fire department purchase. I'm going to let him talk about that. And sit down.
On your agenda, it talks about the bioxide.
Yeah,
That has been taken off.
Number 5 been removed.
right, we're going to bid that one out.
I'm going to put that out for bid.
Chief, you ready?
Yes, sir. This purchase that we're requesting is on a GSA contract for 55 bailout systems for each firefighter that we currently employ, and hopefully a few volunteers that we're going to have an additional personnel, hopefully in the future. A couple of these items will be training, designated for training only. Once you load these ropes, they're pretty much done, and it's a life safety issue. Our request is to grant this so we can purchase these for each firefighter that we have on board.
Any questions?
Any questions?
While you're up here, Chief, you want to inform everybody on your good news?
Are you talking about the grants? And so far, preliminary shows that we're in good standings with the grant services. There's a total of probably somewhere around over $200,000 that we will be receiving in grants this year. That deals with personal protective equipment turnouts to add volunteers at this time, along with a gear washer that's specifically made for turnout gear to remove bloodborne pathogens and any other chemicals that may be on our gear to keep our firemen safe. Along with a vent system that will go into Station 2 to provide so contaminants wouldn't be in the bay as far as carbon monoxide, things like that. We're looking at OSHA standards. And also an air compressor system that will fill breathing air for our firefighters in our compressed air bottles. And then also with Homeland Security, a decontamination trailer that is looking favorable as well.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Felicia, you back up or you done?
I'm done.
Okay, athletic field service, is that you, AC?
That's, we got the grant
Got
contract
se-
for
7B
Greater
for-
Nashville Regional Council.
7B.
And then the NES contract for athletic field services at Veteran Memorial Park, Bicentennial Park.
What that is, to my understanding, when he spoke with Phyllis and I, it's just, they're gonna change the way they group the things together and they're gonna bill us. It's not gonna change the amount we're paying, they're just gonna group different things. I didn't get all of it, but it's just gonna break it up differently on how they charge us for our service.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not any additional cost to it, but, and that, what you understood too, Phyllis, something like that?
Okay. We're gonna remove number 5. Everything else stays the same. Anybody have any questions? No questions. Remove to new business. Appoint or remove board members, committee members. A, Senior Citizen Advisory Committee, 1 term is vacant.
Yes, sir. This is the position of Connie Jones, who resigned a couple of months ago. At this point, I do not have any applications for the Senior Citizens Advisory Committee. If I do not receive any by Tuesday, I will take this off the agenda for Tuesday night.
B, Greenway Advisory Committee, 2 terms expired, 5/31/15.
The terms for Ken Cowan and Doug Smith expire at the end of this month. We've contacted both members to see if they wish to remain. Ken Cowan has moved to Smyrna, so he'll need to come off of the committee. And then Doug Smith would like to remain on the committee, and so he is listed as a current applicant there. We have been advertising this on Channel 3, have not received any new applications for the Greenway Committee.
Moving on to C, Park and Recreation Advisory Committee, 2 terms expired, 3/31/15.
The terms for Jason Cole and Robert Simon expire at the end of May. We've contacted both of them. They both would like to remain on the committee. We have been advertising these on Channel 3, and we have received 1 new application from Debbie Hewen.
Moving on to number D, FYI Economic Development Advisory Committee, 3 terms expired, 6/30/15.
Right. The terms for Tom Clark, Graham Coates, and Kristen Costanzo will expire at the end of June. We'll contact them to see if they wish to remain. Of course, I think Kristen's kind of stuck on there as the city planner, so she's not coming off, but we'll make sure Tom and Graham want to stay on there as well. We'll also advertise on Channel 3 to see if anyone else is interested in applying, but this will not be on the agenda for Tuesday night.
Okay, we've done number 9. First reading, ordinance 2015-12, an ordinance to amend Title 18, Chapter 4, Section 18-401 of the Laverne Municipal Code regarding the water and sewer rates.
This is the ordinance dealing with the water and sewer rates. Currently, the municipal code has the automatic increases set for July 1 of 2015 and 2016 to have a 3% and a 6% increase. What this ordinance does is it, of course, leaves our rates at their current level, but it also adds the annual increases in there as recommended by Mr. Cross a few minutes ago in his study. Obviously, this ordinance will go into effect July 1st, 2015, so the current rates would stay the same. But this also does have the 2% increase for July of 2016 and 2017, and then there's nothing scheduled in there for 18 or 19. And this ordinance is based on the recommendation that Mr. Cross gave in his study.
Any questions on number 9? Moving on to number 10. First reading ordinance 2015-13, an ordinance to amend the fiscal year 2014-2015 general fund budget.
Mayor and Board, these are adjustments that need to be made to our current budget for 14-15. These are expenses that either have gone over or expenses that have come under or additional revenues that we've gotten in, such as bond proceeds. These are just the adjustments for The first one is for the $95,000 principal payment we made for the new 2005 refunding bond that is now our 2014 bond. We had a $32,000 interest payment that was made on our brand new bond, the 2015 bond. Our insurance, we had an increase in our insurance liability for the year. It's an increase actually of about $60,000, but it looks like we only need to expense about 20 of that. I think we've covered the rest of it. We had a THDA grant. We've spent $1,500, and we've also received $1,260 of that. Of course, we had we anticipate spending the funds for all of the new fire equipment of a tune of about $4.9 million. We transferred money from the bond to the capital project streets for the near Schreiben extension and the turn lane. That was $1.2,220,000 that we transferred because of the bond money did go into the general fund, so we had to transfer that out to capital project streets. And then we need to transfer about $15,000 to the Senior Citizen Center fund so that that fund will not run over into the negative at year end. We decreased expenditures in the building line item for the fire department. The reason we did that was, if you'll recall, at the end of last year, we had to go ahead and accrue for the second payment, installment payment. Therefore, we had budgeted for it in 14-15, but we actually accrued it in 13-14, so we needed to reverse that because we actually documented that payment in the previous year, and so that made us have to make a budget adjustment. And then, of course, we increased revenues due to bond proceeds and due to the money we got from the THDA grant. And the net effect of all of this will increase the fund balance by approximately $1.6 million. That's the adjustments for the general fund. Any questions on that one? We can move on to the next.
If there's no question, we'll move on to number 11. Like I say, if you have any questions that you come up between now and Tuesday, just feel free to call Phyllis.
Yeah, fine. This next budget amendment is for our Senior Citizens Fund. Of course, we just discussed that we were transferring money from the general fund into the Senior Citizens Fund. We've done the transfer. Now we've got to address that in the Senior Citizens Fund, and this is just increasing the revenues by $15,000 and increasing the fund balance by $15,000.
No questions on 12, we'll move to 13.
Okay, this is our adjustment we need to make in the grant fund budget. We did receive a couple of grants this year that we did not budget for this year. So when that happens, we have to do a budget amendment. And we received a JAG grant. I think it's approximately $18,000, and we have already expended that money. We've also received a State Farm grant. We're anticipating about spending about $5,000, and we've already gotten reimbursed for most of that, and we expect to get the rest of that reimbursement before year end.
We're through with 13.
12. We just finished 12.
Huh?
We just finished number 12.
Number 12. Moving on 13.
And this is a budget amendment to the Streets Capital Project Fund. As we discussed in the general fund, we transferred $1.2,020,000 to the Capital Project Streets Fund, and we will have we did not budget for that in this fiscal year, so we do have that increased revenues, and we anticipate expenses related to that project, about $100,000 for engineering services for the near Shriven extension, and about $100,000 for the this could be engineering and construction, but mostly engineering cost. About $100,000 for the intersection improvement. These are just roundabout numbers, just to, because we do have to budget for them, so we wanted to make sure that we were covered. This may be a little bit more than what we needed to adjust, but at least we're covered for the audit's sake. And then the $9,000 that you see up there was actually some additional money that additional expenses that we had related to Waldron Road, where we have some condemnation issue, and I think this was for a reappraisal. Since we're not spending all the $1.2 million, $1 million of that will go back into the fund balance. And I believe that's all of the budget amendments. This is kind of a, a cleanup that we have to do. Every year we have to go through and analyze whether or not we budgeted correctly during the year, and if we don't, we have to make these adjustments. It's required by, our state law, and of course our auditors require it too, but we have to have a balanced budget. There may be additional adjustments, additional budget amendments as we get closer to our year-end audit. Our auditors have been with us for the last couple of weeks. We don't anticipate very many more, but there could be a possibility we might have an amendment later on. But these are, so far right now, these are our amendments as of today.
That's amendments is something we got to do.
Yep.
Any further questions? We'll move to number 14. Thank you, Phyllis. Number 14, first reading ordinance 2015-17, an ordinance to amend the city of Laverne zoning ordinance by changing the official zoning map for tax map 140 Group A, parcel 39, consisting of approximately 0.3 acres located at 1501 Piercy Street, from a R2 minimum density residential zoning district to a I1 light industrial zoning district. Received a favorable recommendation from the Planning Commission on May 26, 2015. This property is on the corner of Dick Buchanan and Piercy Street. It's a vacant lot now. Once it had I think it had a double wide trailer on it at one time, and they wanting to change the zoning. I guess they want to sell it, but the lot right next to it went through the same thing. 2 years ago? And that was on the corner of New View and Dick Buchanan. Anybody have any questions on this rezoning?
Just any feedback after you posted the signs? Any feedback at all?
No, actually, the sign has now been posted for over a month, and I've not received any phone calls. And there's a great diversity of land use and zoning on that street. So Miss Roberts she feels it's unsafe and it's just not suitable for residential. And her neighbor directly next door, who actually has a residence, doesn't have any concerns. He actually mows her lawn. So I've not received any feedback at all. And I do have letters, if we do proceed with this, I do have letters ready to send out for the public hearing.
The only feedback I've got is the couple that lives across the street, and they're kind of isolated around now, but it's been a few months ago. But I hadn't heard nothing about this rezoning. I don't know if anybody's notified them or not.
The sign has been there for, like I said, probably 5 weeks, so I would think everybody is aware, and I think Ms. Roberts indicated she had talked to a lot of the residents, and the majority of the older residents are established further down towards Humble, and as you know, the great majority of all the parcels on the corners have all changed to either heavy industrial, light industrial, or commercial.
And a lot of the property there, the people that lives there don't own the property in that subdivision in general. So a lot of renters there. So.
And with this being vacant, should the rezoning go through, if somebody does want to develop it in the future, it will have to go to the planning commission for site plan approval. So.
But ain't it I noticed on the other one, it was writing 2 years ago, ain't it a 50-foot buffer between industrial and residential?
It would depend. I don't have the buffer ordinance in front of me. It depends on what the land uses are in addition to the zoning classification. I know that there was enough room for the previous one, so that's something that definitely will be looked at the site plan phase.
Just seemed like 0.3 acres, even on the other one, was sort of small.
Well, and the planning commission does have the ability to waive the specific feet of the buffer, depending on if there's an existing fence or if there's an existing area of tall vegetation, any of those considerations. So it will definitely be taken into consideration.
I went by and looked at it today. The physical address is Piercy Street, but the majority of the land stretch is facing Dick Buchanan.
Right.
It's kind of a long, narrow lot, and most of the land frontage is on Dick Buchanan than Piercy Street.
Right.
And it also butts up next to the one that was just zoned 2 years ago.
That is correct.
Any further questions on number 14? Moving number 15, Resolution 2015-03, a resolution to approve rules and regulations for the Laverne Farmers Market.
I'm going to let AC and Donna handle this one. This is the resolution coming back for the farmers market. You know, if you'll recall, a couple months ago, 3 months ago, whatever it was, this had previously come up to be held over at the Civic Auditorium. Since that time, it looks like we're going to move it over to the library, and this is the rules and regulations for that, and I'll let them explain the rules and regulations.
Well, we've been working on this. We try to keep it as simple as possible. We kind of pulled a little bit from some of the agreements that we have at the Parks Department and some other things that we've seen, I believe. So we got something from Franklin, and we took a little bit from everywhere. And we're trying to keep it very simple. It's a simple user agreement, and we're planning on going with a $10 fee on Tuesday afternoon like we talked about. And all checks will be made out to the Laverne Senior Center. That way we know for sure. And if they pay cash, you know, we'll give them receipts saying the same thing, and we'll get that turned in. And Phyllis said that we'll set up a certain account just for that money to go into that. Donna, you want to?
Some of the rules and provisions, we did make it just a 2-page. There's the application, and then there's rules and provisions. And Evan, you and Bruce may want to help me out with the hold harmless. I wasn't real sure how to word that. In fact, it's not on there. But primarily, we put the primary purpose of the Laverne Farmers Market is to provide homegrown produce, organic meats, eggs, and other agricultural items for human consumption to our community. And on the application on the front, we did say that they are to specify the contents of their booth and agricultural products only, and any items not for human consumption must be approved by the Parks or Library Director. We put that there because we know there may be people who will want to sell fresh flowers. There may be some other things, and we're going to do that on a base by what am I trying to say?
Case by case.
Thank you, a case by case.
Yeah.
We just went on through that the fees are due to the Laverne Parks and Recreation Department, 7 days prior to the market date. All rental fees do go to support the Laverne Senior Center. In the event that the farmer's market must be canceled, such as extreme weather conditions, the fee will be applied to the next Tuesday, and the fee is non-refundable. The rental space is outdoors and will be in a grassy area. They are to bring their own tables, chairs, tents, etc. No electricity will be available. Setup begins at 2. Vendors must be on site and ready for sales by 3. Prior to commencing sales, market prices for all items must be visibly posted. Vendors are allowed to leave as products are sold out. However, the market will officially close at 7 p.m. We're asking that they properly dispose of all trash. The library dumpster located in the parking lot and the dumpster located behind the multipurpose building will be available for trash disposal. Vendors shall have access to the Laverne Public Library restroom facilities, and vendors shall conduct themselves in a courteous and professional manner with other vendors, library park staff, and market patrons. Any input?
What about live chickens, live ducks, and pigs?
We would prefer not to have live chickens, ducks, or pigs, or
But is it in
cows,
the-
or...
They are for human consumption.
But
But
is it in the
we
I'm trying
ordinance?
to keep it to vegetable type things.
But it is in
Right.
the ordinance, though.
We would prefer for any meat to already be dead.
But is it in the ordinance, though?
But there are a few things that we didn't put in here, like we didn't specify on the space. We figure we'll start out, small with, and if it's approved Tuesday, we're gonna go ahead and see if we can at least get a couple vendors for the following Tuesday. And then that'll be a case by case thing too, because some people will come with bigger trucks and some will be pulling trailers and we'll just we'd like to talk to each one of them before we actually approve them coming out, because like you said, we don't want them rolling up in here with chickens and ducks and tube socks and everything else. So if we know, what they're bringing, we'll make sure, that they're gonna fit right. And
Do we need to put that in the ordinance? If
I
I pull up
think
with
we're safe.
If I pull up with a truckload of chickens, can I sell them?
No.
Okay.
I like that you have a right to deny limit.
that's why we put that on there. Now, if you bring a chicken wearing tube socks, I'd like to see that. But
See, I wasn't gonna say it.
What if it's chewing bubble gum?
We will take the eggs from the chickens.
yeah.
I do have a question, though. When you talk about them taking care of their own garbage, it's a good idea. Certainly, I like the idea of them using your dumpster for a lot of reasons. You don't know, again, if they do have something, even if it's just old fruit, it can be kind of a problem. You can have some bugs and so on, and you certainly don't want to have any rodent problems. So is it common? Do they normally take their trash with them, or does like Smyrna or Murfreesboro or anywhere we've looked into, do they have a dumpster there for them? Or I just would hate the library to run into problems because of it. So.
And I can kind of speak from experience. My dad and I went to the farmer's market for many, many years in Murfreesboro. Normally, you do take any of your waste back with you, any of your vegetables or anything of this sort. And we are going to be talking to them personally, and what we would like to provide is if they have a trash bag and they throw their paper cups, or if people have thrown paper or whatever, then that's what we would like to put in the dumpster. So we do probably need to put on there something about what type of trash that they can dispose of. That's a very good point.
Glenn just pointed out too that there is a dumpster beside CID too that's always empty. Now, the only problem with it is that we have the one, Donna I'm sure has the same problem we have, the one by the multi-purpose building. People from the apartments and everywhere else bring their trash and throw it in there. And it'll probably be similar stuff, but, and that's why we want to talk to each other and make sure that,
That's a very good point.
One
Most
thing.
of that vegetation, I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead.
Most of that vegetation can be composted as well, so possibility they may be doing that to fertilize. So.
Right.
The only thing I noticed in looking at this a minute ago, in regards to electricity, I like the idea that you're not going to provide electricity, but you may want to address the issue of generators. If they need to bring generators for their coolers or whatever, we need to make sure that they're quiet and not disruptive, that sort of thing. So
that's a good idea.
may
And that's
wanna
why
add
we brought it
something
to
like
y'all,
that.
so y'all can, if you got any input, we'll certainly add that in there.
If you're trying to roll with this, if it's approved for the Tuesday after it's approved,
We'd like to.
you'll, that first week, just waive that 7-day notification requirement with a $10 deposit?
Correct.
Okay.
If y'all approve it Tuesday, Wednesday, I'll call and get a couple of banners made, and if we can find even 1 or 2 vendors to come out, that'll at least get the ball rolling some.
Well, I can't bring my chickens.
No chickens, Mayor. If you will notice, it does say that it has to be approved by the library or parks director, and I've heard the library director's pretty firm.
Pretty tough.
Yeah, she is. So, no chickens.
So this will be an every Tuesday thing.
Well, we planned on shooting for 2 Tuesdays a month, but depending on how it works out, yeah, possibly, you know. I mean, if we can generate enough interest and enough vendors, you know, it could go that way.
And you also don't have any ending month or anything like that, so
No.
it could theoretically be year-round.
Could, but then we might have to have
Just
some
things to
chickens.
consider,
And,
you know.
no, and this is why we wanted to, you know,
Yeah.
to bring it to you guys, because I tend to focus on certain things that I'm going to be involved in, and some of those other things are just kind of out there, but that's so true. We do need to have an ending month, and I think it's going to be kind of depend on when we begin.
Right.
And we have been talking to some people. In fact, one of my staff members, he goes to Farmer Mitch. This is in Nashville, and he is in the co-op where Farmer Mitch will bring him X amount in a bushel basket. And Bill has been talking to him, and he even asked me today, has Farmer Mitch, you know, contacted you? He's very interested. So there is some interest out there. It's just going to see if we can get that rallied together. But if not, then, you know, I think we have a really good springboard for next year.
We were discussing the possibility of grants. Will that, if you were to be able to get something next week, will you be able to apply?
On the crafts,
Yeah.
I think at this point we are going to try to stick with agricultural products. It's going to depend. That's our main purpose at this time, is to get some really healthy homegrown food out to our community. It may grow into that. I know we have talked about that. But again, I think our focus is on
No, I'm sorry.
grants. I'm sorry, I thought you said crafts. Yes, hello. Let me start again. Alderman Jones, we have not looked into any grants yet at this point. But crafts, we apparently are really thinking about crafts with summer reading coming up. I apologize for that.
No problem. I believe it's something, once it's up and running, by this time next year, we could certainly apply for it. So it's good
Absolutely.
test out the waters this summer, and then once it's up and running, we can apply.
We just appreciate you all giving us this opportunity to try it. It's, I think it's going to be really good, of course, for our community and also for the library. We may be able to get some people in there that normally wouldn't come to the library, but if they're going to come and buy their produce, then we're going to be out there encouraging them to come in and make some crafts this summer. Okay, I'm going to get a lot of heat for that from my staff watching this.
Just a rough estimate, what would be full capacity? $10 a head?
Well, a lot of that's going to depend on how big, you know, because some of them will bring trucks, some of them will bring pickup trucks and set up tables. You know, it's going to be a case-by-case thing.
That's the question also. Let's say that I just brought a little 6 by 8 foot, and then this other guy brought a 20. Can you adjust that and say, okay, yours is $15 or $20? Because you're taking up 2 to 3 spaces.
Most
That's a good
places,
point.
if you rent a place, it's a 10 by 20 area that you rent. They call that one booth. A 10 by 20. That's 10 cross and 20 deep.
Right, and we can certainly go out with field marking paint and mark out some spots. And,
Yeah, because I think
put that
you'd
on
be
there.
cheating
Yes, we can
yourself if
definitely
someone
put-
comes and they've
Right.
got
It's a good point.
huge areas.
I might put in there space 10 by 20. Since y'all killed my chickens, what about Girl Scout cookies and puppies?
Girl Scout cookies and puppies?
Not at this time. That will come when we do the crafts. Right, the generators.
Chicken.
Generator.
kind of little puppy.
I apologize. I did not mean to make this into one of my speeches that I usually do. I'm not dressed in superhero or anything tonight. Do you have any other questions? And we appreciate that. This is why we wanted to bring it, is to get all this input, and we will definitely go back, reword, and have this ready for you by Tuesday.
When you're thinking about an ending, you might want to just consider fall pumpkins. Just a thought, because the produce does extend into that period of time, just to plant that seed.
And Halloween, what about bats and black cats?
Not at this time.
How about witches?
Do you have any other questions? And please feel free to email AC or myself any suggestions, or give us a call, or stop by the library.
The guidelines are good. It gives us a starting framework to begin
that's what we're
with.
shooting for. Just,
Right.
you know, something to build on.
And did not want to make it so overwhelming at this time, because we're not sure how small we're going to be or how big we're going to be. But it does give us a framework.
But it'll be somebody that show up that's gonna press the issue.
Always is.
On chickens, and you laugh, but you'll be surprised.
Right.
Who would show up with a load of chickens?
Yeah.
And it won't be me.
Okay, good.
All right.
Thank you. Any
Thank
other
y'all.
questions? Yes, sir.
Thank you.
No. Thank you.
Moving on, number 16, Resolution 2015-09, a resolution of the City of Laverne to appropriate funds to nonprofit organizations.
Mayor, this is the resolution we do every year to designate the nonprofit appropriations for the next fiscal year. And this is all of the ones that are in the budget for next year.
Any questions?
I just have a quick question. I know we've cut the chamber, their funding. They still pay one of our trips out to Las Vegas. They still pay one of them, or
One, I think.
okay. And I just wanted, when we were out there this last week, I was approached by the chamber and actually by some of the surrounding cities, and nothing else, they'd like to start some dialogue again with the city, and I would be open to it if we could ever get that scheduled with, say, Brian Hercules or Paul Latour or someone, where we could sit down with them and just open to what they want to do. They want to try to bring the county back together. In the light of some of the other things that we saw out there with our one group, I guess I would be open to it. So I just want to say that while I can, while the cameras are running. But they really showed a real interest in getting back with Laverne and working for Laverne. And in fact, I think they just made an announcement 2 days ago that we have something pretty big coming our way that they worked on for last year. So anyway, I can't do this other time, so while we're sitting up here with the camera rolling, I wanted to say it.
Got a hand?
What about it?
Is it not supposed to be Rutherford County Emergency Management? EMA. EMA?
Oh, it's EMA? Yeah. I can change that.
I was just making sure somebody hadn't tried to throw something in there on us somewhere.
And on behalf of CAC, thank you all.
You're welcome. You're welcome. No more on 16. We'll move to 17. Motion to approve. Am I running too fast for you?
No, you're fine.
Number 17, motion to approve a memorandum of understanding with the Laverne Rescue Unit Incorporated.
We've been talking about having some sort of agreement in place with the rescue unit. Obviously, a few years ago when we were giving them money, we had a very long, drawn-out contract with them, basically, that spelled everything out. This is a little shorter, a little less detailed, And this is just a draft. There's some things that we still need to address in it, but this is the MOU for the rescue unit. Also, the next item is the MOU with Box 100. Both of them are basically identical. Some of the training is different. Obviously, the services provided will be different. You know, I think it boils down to if you want to do an MOU with these two organizations, you know, this is kind of the starting point for it. You know, Box 100 is listed under nonprofit donations, and really Rescue Squad is listed under emergency services. They really need to be in the same area one way or the other. They either need to be both a nonprofit donation, or they both need to be, you know, kind of a contracted type service. And if you have them as a contracted service, you know, you also have to look at purchasing rules and regulations, things like that, which we've not done. We've not bid any of these things out. So, you know, it all depends on how you want to look at it, how you want to handle it. I know there's some things that at least one or two board members have mentioned that they would like to see in the agreements, as far as a code of conduct or some sort of ethics policy, things like that. That is not in here at this time. But we could talk about it and see what you wanted to do. But that's just kind of my initial synopsis of these two items. So, any questions or anything?
Well, I agree. I think both of them needs to be out of nonprofit, which I think I've made my suggestions that I'd like for Laverne to go next year, become more like Smyrna, to get out of the nonprofit business and get the nonprofits that we got to be donations. And I think both Box 100 and Rescue Squad would both probably be better off fit in another category.
And quite frankly, if you look at that list of nonprofits, not to jump back up to number 16, but several of those are not really a nonprofit donation. You know, they provide services for the city. You've got the Chamber of Commerce. You've got, you know, things like Rutherford County. You've got Regional Transportation Authority, the EMA. Obviously, we've got a contract with them where we have to pay for their emergency something manager. I forget what he's called. Director. You know, so several of these are not true nonprofits. Obviously, your Smyrna Laverne Food Bank, your Smyrna Laverne Assistance Coalition, you know, Laverne Boxing, you know, a lot of those would be nonprofit donations, but several of these really truly need to be recategorized to reflect it's more of a service that they provide than just a donation.
I guess number 18, we pretty well covered it. It's about the same thing.
I don't know if you have any questions about the MOUs. I know most of you, maybe all of you, are seeing this for the first time, but please read through these, and if there's anything you'd like to see changed or added, you know, Evan and I can work on that and hopefully have that ready by.
But Evan, you looked at both of them.
Yes, sir, I have, and you know, really was just interested in your feedback in terms of what sort of arrangement you wanted to have. You know, what your thoughts were and what you might want to see in that and that sort of thing.
And any one of them can call.
Yes, sir.
You or Bruce.
Call us, yes, sir. Be fine. Just call us and let us know.
And several of us, staff members, had met with both groups, Rescue and Box. And actually, what we had presented to them was more detailed than what these are. Evan, when he revised, you know, some of those items more operational and don't really need to be spelled out in a memorandum of understanding. So these are a little bit shorter than what we had originally presented to both groups. But like I said, there are a couple things that we do need to add into these, you know, that we'll have ready for Tuesday night, that they're just not ready at this point.
Okay. No other questions? We'll move on to 19. Motion to enforce tax liens by court order delinquent property tax. Evan, I guess that'd be more your
Yes, sir, that's
expertise.
right. We've got, one particular landowner that, is delinquent and has built up a fairly large, arrearage. And frankly, we weren't sure, Bruce and I talked about it, we weren't sure whether or not we needed to come to y'all before we took further action to sue this particular landowner. We both agreed that to err on the side of caution, we would bring it before you to get permission to do that. But not to bore you with too many details, there's a master tax suit that's filed every year around April, where anybody who owes money to Laverne for taxes is named in that Chancery Court lawsuit. In order to actually force the sale of real estate to collect that, you have to take another step, which is filing an admitted complaint to actually force the sale of somebody's real estate so that we can collect those taxes. In order to do that, we've got to file sort of another lawsuit, basically. So we're just here to present that to y'all. And I don't know if somebody here can speak specifically to how much money's owed on this.
Yeah, in the memo, I've kind of outlined the amounts. City taxes, of course, most of these have been turned over to Chancery Court. He owes almost $6,000 in property taxes to the city, but most of that, like I said, once it goes to Chancery Court, you have other costs added. You got penalty interest, you got court cost, so that obviously increases that. So that total amount that goes through Chancery Court, just for the city portion, is $7,357.95. The 2014 taxes, the $771, obviously that's not been turned over to Chancery yet. If those are not paid, they will be turned over next April, essentially. Also on the county taxes, he's paid those through 2012, but 2013 he owes $3,181. So just between the county and the city, you know, he owes over $10,000 in back taxes. And there again, the 2014s for the county also are not turned over to Chancery until next year. So obviously it's a substantial amount of money that really needs to be paid.
This is basically different than what we write off on year. A lot of what we write off is on tax is like personal property. This is actually city property tax.
Right. Any taxes that we don't collect, property taxes, there's a 10-year window where we have to collect those. After 10 years, whether it's property taxes or personal property taxes, no matter what, we have to write those off because they're not collectible at that point.
Within 10 years.
After 10 years.
Any further questions? We done number 20, so we're getting down to 21, and that's discussion CPR classes taught by the fire department.
Over the last year and a half, we have approximately 11 CPR instructors that are currently employed with the Laverne Fire Department. These firefighters worked hard to get their instructor. We've trained majority of the city employees here at the cost of $3 per person for the city employees. They did a marvelous job, and I think that all the employees and even the firefighters love being there together and working together. We've had a lot of inquiries about the public receiving CPR training. However, we have determined that due to staffing, everyday staffing challenges, it becomes even more difficult if we pull 2 or 3 firemen over to provide instruction for the citizens. So therefore, we think that it would be best that we put those firemen, bring them in on their day off, spend 2 or 3 hours doing the CPR instructor, provide that for the citizens. It's our goal is to maybe quarterly put out dates for the citizens if they want CPR training. And we were requesting to charge them $20 per person. Now, $3 of that goes to their certification card, and then the rest of it would go to the overtime expenditure for the fire department. So basically, it's a reimbursement to the city on the overtime expense. Currently, many agencies across the state do this, and that therefore the the city wouldn't lose anything as far as overtime expenditures. Are there any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. AC?
I got a little bit more information on the RTA thing. I just got a text message from Luis, the guy that's running the football league this year. Monday, July 6th, they will start their football camp, which will run for the week, and then regular practices will start July 13th. So at that, starting on the 6th, they'll need as many spaces as they can get, especially once we start our fall ball. So it's going to be
Maybe they can find an alternate place. That'd be the best thing to do. Okay.
When does fall ball normally start?
It usually starts end of August and September, because we have to put off a week of ball because it's Old Timers Day, so it starts right in there. But once they start, coming in for practices, and practices start before the season starts, so that parking lot's going to be getting a workout. It always does. They on the grass and everywhere else, because there's not enough spaces as it is. So.
You got anything else? We're down to Mayor Alderman comments. We'll start with Alderman Broker.
I'm good. I think we had a very productive trip for our retail convention. I think a lot of good things are coming for Laverne. So just found out Walmart's are just about, or have they put the shovels in the ground now? Okay, so I think the overriding theme was everybody was anxious. All the retailers were waiting for that to happen. So I think we're got some exciting things coming. That's about it.
Alderman Brown.
I have nothing.
Nothing. Alderman Jones.
Nothing.
Vice Mayor Green.
I know that all the ladies are proud that Laverne's coming, that Walmart's coming to Laverne. We don't have to drive all the way to Smyrna. So that's all I know.
I went to Miss Carey's funeral yesterday. We lost a Laverne icon. She was here in this building for many years as chamber, and Kyle, prayer stayed with him with his loss of his uncle, and reminding people about the seniors yard sale Saturday at the senior center. If anybody's got any items they want to donate, drop it by the senior center, or they can even come by there and rent a booth.
Rent a booth for $5.
Get a
$5
table.
A table for $10.
Or $10. You bring your own table for $5.
You get a smaller table, we have card tables that you can get for $5.
Okay, 5 or 10.
We're watching the weather because
because
there's
it may.
a 60% chance for Saturday last I seen. So we'll make an announcement tomorrow. Our makeup day is next Saturday.
Well, the last time I heard, the rain's gonna come in late Saturday around 3 o'clock. So I done my little rain dance for y'all.
Dennis is bringing them, we will.
We just sell anything down there.
What about Girl Scout cookies? And the last thing about the Rotary, every Saturday, remember, every Saturday the Rotary has the car show at the Sonic CBS on Murfreesboro Road. It starts about 6. Hopefully the weather will hold out for it. And that's it. Everybody have a good weekend. I'll call it. Can I call it adjourned? Yes. All right, call it adjourned.